Oh, we didn't bring up the pharmacy thing. Oh, well.
Welcome to another episode of Innovation Minutes Live. I am Dan Gonzalez, and I'm joined by my co-host, Anna Akbari. Today, we are talking about the content companies and the rise I guess just the rise of user-generated content and what it has come to mean in terms of its political impact, its societal impact. And, I think kind of the crux of the issue is that user-generated content started off as a kind of free-for-all, right? Where anybody can say anything and publish it at any time, right? And that was the promise of the internet. And where it got a little confused was when companies like Facebook started adding an algorithmic approach and controlling the manner and the timing and I guess the ranking in which things were posted and available to other people. And I think that has now, going back to the election specifically is when I think it kind of came to the forefront. That's really where we are right now. It's the world we live in.
It gets a different level of seriousness when it started to influence, the direction of our country and our leadership, which is very different than just, who's going to be the next online sensation or influencer. Then it seems less urgent to create some kind of a regulatory body or governing principles around that, And I think also because of the fact that these social platforms became popular and were revered in part because it was giving voices to those that didn't previously have a platform to be heard. So that sort of multiplicity of perspectives is, of course, to be celebrated. But then what happens when that doesn't have any regulation and, there are really clever ways of amplifying specific voices and really strategic technological tricks that I think the average citizen isn't fully aware of. Because just because their Facebook post isn't being covered necessarily by a million people, they don't quite understand it.
Right, and I think, when it comes to content, a lot of that genuine and great user-generated content is still there and it's still available. It's just been kind of crowded out by, much more strategically placed content, paid content.
Yeah.
And, if you think about it, like going back to the election, really what happened was you had all of this content that formerly just lived in these crazy chain mails that people would send along and forward to each other. And at some point, somebody got the idea that said, okay, let's take this crazy chainmail content, format it like a real news article, put it online in a site that looks just like a news site, and make nice little snippet posts for people that they can then post on their Facebook walls. And you instantly reach, millions and millions of more people. And, because of whatever ranking algorithm, Facebook or whoever is using, that content now gets floated up and above the normal user-generated content.
Yeah, and of course, because there's so much sophisticated data analysis, there's a real awareness of what is the tasty clickbait that people can't resist. Mm-hmm. And we're all presented with that at the bottom of we could be reading an article, and then there's all these like sponsored posts at the bottom, and it's like basically clicking on the National Enquirer essentially, and you kind of hate yourself a little bit if you ever do click on one of them.
No, it's a race to the bottom. We are racing to the bottom, and honestly, I think even we're guilty of it a little bit, right? Because we have a YouTube channel and we publish videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
And
it's the name of the game. How do you get eyeballs? And so something like a presidential election is not exempt from vying for attention and doing what it takes to get that attention. So I think we're at an interesting turning point, where we have things like the FCC that regulates content and media. And I would look for there to be something similar on these big social content channels.
Yeah, maybe not specifically the content itself in terms of regulation, but definitely the algorithms that are used to circulate that content. I think those, while Facebook would argue that they're proprietary and they can't share them, I think we need to know. I think the public and the people who use these platforms have a right to know.
Yeah, greater transparency. And I think also, and perhaps this is happening, it's kind of hard to read, but I think a greater sense of urgency from these companies and an embrace of the enormous level of influence and responsibility that they have. They're not just another consumer company making money. They're, and again, this is how we've come to regard the media, and this is why the media, the sort of mainstream media, is so regulated, because there is this understanding that this is what shapes culture and helps people to make decisions. And now I think these companies are being forced to recognize that they're in a very similar influential role.
Yep.
So
yep.
Let us know what you think. Where do you stand on this? Have you seen anything being done, or what are some kind of clever tactics that you think would help to rein this in and make sure that content remains open and freely circulated, while still not doing harm to our culture and society? So we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. It's a difficult topic. It can be a contentious one, but I think if we look at it more from a kind of cultural perspective, and there are a lot of really interesting solutions that can be presented. So let us know what you think.
All right. See you next week.